This is the video review of my custom IDW Ultra Magnus. Here's how he scales with several other figures. He's about 11 inches to the top of his head. Okay, and I want to show off his accessory, this giant hammer, which is made mostly out of Lego parts. So it's pretty large. So I made this figure using a G1 Ultra Magnus and then some RID Optimus and Ultra Magnus parts. So this was a pretty old figure that I made, so there's some kind of techniques in here that I've updated since then. But he's got ball jointed shoulders, which can go up about that much. And then he's got the original bicep swivel and elbow of the figure from the G1 figure. He's also got a ball joint neck, which has a lot of range. And then he does have waist articulation, which isn't that important to me, but I figured I'd throw that in while I was building him. Wrists are a little bit hindered just because of the way this section here is made on the back of his elbow. And then he does have the finger articulation. And there's a little stress mark there. I could probably take that out with a hairdryer. He's also got a little bit of forward kick, not very much. And these hip joints are really loose just from the ball joints being so old, and they're cracked at this point from the dry environment. And then he's got 90 degrees on the knee. And he's also got a cut for thigh swivel. And he's got a little bit of articulation on the toes just to help with his balance a little bit. So here's how he looks all the way around. He's got a pretty clean back. It'd be nice to clean up these ball joint sections here. Definitely could use some polish. But definitely no kibble going on. He's very sleek looking. And then I'm really proud of how I did these leg sections here. So I like that that cleans up really nicely too. Transformation is pretty simple overall, but it does have a couple of fiddly parts. So these open up and then they're just going to rotate forward to make the rear of his car carrier. And then his knee pads are going to rotate down, and those can open up. Okay, and you do the same with the other side. And then there is a little shifting joint here from the Cybertron Optimus Prime, and use that to just peg these legs together. And that's pretty much the whole rear of the car carrier already. Getting his arms set up is also pretty easy. First you move the chest piece, rotates up and out of the way, and then the arms are just going to rotate up like the G1 figure, and then you just extend these joints to make the top of the car carrier. Okay, and then basically you're just going to peg the two shoulders together, just like the original G1 figure. And then the forearms will also peg together. Okay, so here's the trailer, nice and cleaned up. And then this is the part that's a little bit more difficult. So the whole cab of the truck has to be pulled out and extended on this joint here. And then these wheels will flip out. And then his head is going to end up inside of the cab of the truck. And then there's also this collar joint, which will also end up inside of the cab once it's in place, and that just cleans up his robot mode. So to get his head in, you rotate it down and around, and then face it this way, and then you just push that as far as possible all the way into the cab to hide it. And then this joint you kind of have to, this is the part that I said was fiddly. So this whole cab is on a ball joint, which will allow it to move up. And then you have to also slide the collar joint in there kind of at the same time. And then when you clean that up, you have the cab that looks a little bit like this. So there's a lot of random kibble going on, and then there's some ugliness from the epoxy that I used to use. He does have a little bit of articulation in the front to look like it's swiveling, but not much going on. So there's overall the entire vehicle mode. And this car carrier is pretty giant. It can carry 4 movie deluxes or the current War for Cybertron deluxes. And then the back ramps still work for his shins, so those still open up, which allows for the cars to exit. And just like the G1 figure, you can still lower the upper level to allow for access there so the cars can drive up to the upper level. So it's kind of a functional car carrier. And then it's got some grooves there that the wheels, depending on the car, can engage with to keep it up there. And one last feature, I like it when the Transformers have weapon storage. So the top of the hammer comes off, and that actually pegs into the grill. There's a small hole right there where this will peg in. And then basically I just throw the shaft back here. There's not really a dedicated spot for it. And then you have a vehicle mode that has kind of like this steamroller in front, which I think is a good use for that extra part. And then as you can see, he rolls pretty well. These wheels look like they're not really engaging, but for the most part, it works out. And I think that's a pretty fun little gimmick with this steamroller in the front. So I hope you like that look at one of my custom figures. It's probably 8 or 9, maybe 10 years old at this point, so I've learned a lot since then about customizing, and I really would kind of like to redo this figure, but it's made of so many different parts that would really be a hassle.